The rain tapped gently on the windows of the federal office building in Washington, D.C., as a man in polished shoes and a tailored suit made his way through the marble halls. It was 1962, and President John F. Kennedy had come unannounced to one of the government departments for a surprise visitor habit he'd developed to stay connected with everyday Americans. His Secret Service agents kept a quiet distance as Kennedy wandered curiously through the hallways, nodding to clerks and shaking hands with wide-eyed staff. But nothing could have prepared him more, the entire office, for what happened next. As he turned a corner near the east wing, Kennedy paused when he heard something peculiar. A deep, resonant voice echoed softly from a nearby supply closet, not the humming of a tune or casual conversation, but something else. Foreign words, pronounced with perfect clarity and rhythm, danced through the air. The president, intrigued, followed the sound and gently opened the door. Inside, the janitor, a graying man in his mid-50s, with calloused hands and a mop in one, was speaking fluent French to himself, reciting what sounded like a poem. Startled by the sudden presence of the most powerful man in America, the janitor dropped the mop. "And Mr. President," he stammered, eyes wide. Kennedy smiled, motioning him to relax. "That was beautiful." "Was that Baudelaire?" The janitor's face lit up, almost in disbelief. "Yes, sir, L'Albatros, you know it." Kennedy nodded. "A favorite of mine in college. I took French literature." What followed was a brief yet extraordinary exchange. The janitor, whose name tag read Miguel Ramirez, continued to surprise the president by effortlessly switching between German, Russian, Mandarin, Swahili, Arabic, Portuguese, Italian, and Latin, all with fluency that would impress diplomats. Kennedy stood there in awe. How on earth does a janitor come to speak 9 languages? Miguel smiled humbly. "I used to be a professor back in Guatemala. Language was my life, but war changes things. I lost my family. I lost my home. I came here and started over. The only job I could get without papers or connections was cleaning floors. I've been doing it ever since." The president was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away. By Monday morning, everything changed. When the office workers arrived, they found the lobby buzzing with excitement. Rumors flew that Kennedy had made a midnight call to the Secretary of Education. Others swore the president himself had spoken directly to Harvard's admissions board. But one thing was certain: Miguel Ramirez was no longer mopping floors. Instead, he was standing at the front of a crowded conference room, now wearing a crisp suit and holding a folder of documents. Kennedy had arranged for Miguel to be granted full citizenship, reinstated as a professor, and appointed as a senior linguistics advisor to the Department of Education. The man who once cleaned their hallways was now advising on national language policy. Tears welled in Miguel's eyes as he stood before the same people who once passed him in the hall without a glance. "I never expected this. I only wanted to feel useful, to speak, so I wouldn't forget," he said softly. Kennedy, present once more, stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes greatness is sweeping the floor next to us. We must never forget the power of human potential, hidden, not by talent, but by circumstance." The room erupted into applause. Word of Miguel's story swept across the country. He became a symbol of resilience, proof that the American dream was still alive for those who never gave up on themselves. Universities reached out for lectures. News stations begged for interviews. But Miguel remained humble, spending his days teaching young minds and volunteering as a translator for immigrant families in need. Years later, when Kennedy was gone and Miguel had retired, a young student approached him after a lecture and asked, "Professor, what would you have done if the president hadn't heard you that day?" Miguel smiled and looked toward the window, eyes reflecting years of hardship and hope. "I would have kept speaking to the mop closet. Because if you stop sharing your gift, even with the walls, then you've truly lost it." And so, the story of Miguel Ramirez, the janitor who spoke 9 languages and captured the ear of a president, lives on, reminding us that brilliance knows no uniform, and sometimes, The most powerful voices are the ones we're not listening to yet. In the end, Kennedy didn't just find a polyglot janitor, he uncovered a buried treasure in plain sight. And in doing so, he inspired a nation to look beyond titles and see the humanity, the genius, and the soul behind every pair of working hands.